Hi guys, it's JoINrbs. Welcome back to my series where I'm reviewing the 8 major classes in Long War II, breaking each into 3 pieces, the early, mid, and late game. Today we're talking about late game assaults. For all of these videos, I'm talking about alpha strike and breakdown ratings, and for alpha striking, the ability to kill all enemies before they can really react. I'm giving late game assaults a 9 out of 10, very, very high rating. And for breakdown rating, the ability to perform well in the situation where enemies are getting to attack you, and sort of the control that XCOM usually has over a battle has fallen completely apart. I'm giving assaults a perfect 10 out of 10. These soldiers are very, 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 very good late game soldiers. Now, one thing that isn't able to be captured in those ratings that I just gave is that assaults are going to get wounded. And so in terms of their actual output in a campaign, sure, you can bring an assault on a mission and have that assault be insanely strong for the mission. But if you really do get into some rough and tumble stuff, the assault's probably going to take a few scratches and be wounded for a week or two. It's a sort of unique feel to a class because I don't think any other class in the game gets wounded as reliably as assaults do. They just love to run forward at enemies and then get shot for not all of their health, but like half of their health sometimes. So that's something to watch out for and something to keep in mind when you're evaluating this class for sure. But in general, the soldier is quite mobile, has extremely high damage output by itself or supported by an officer with Oscar Mike and command or something like that. This is a soldier who really benefits from getting in proximity to enemies, and what happens to an assault's shots from being next to an enemy is more impressive than basically any other shot that you can take in the entire campaign, except maybe a Sharpshooter's Kubikuri if you're stacking up crit on that Sharpshooter with help from other perks and so on and so forth. The assault just performs extremely well by itself and can perform even better than that when given support though. So let's look at Gunnery Sergeant perks, and I'm going to start this off by saying that 5 out of 6 of the perks that I'm going to talk about today are just insanely strong, in my opinion. Very, very, very strong. And I'm going to argue for picking 2 out of those 6, because you have to pick 2 perks for 2 level ups. But I think that the other 3, which are very strong, are extremely strong, and I'm going to say why I think that as well. And I also think that assaults are quite flexible and able to be built different ways depending on how exactly your campaign's going. So, for example, if you don't have exosuits, you're going to have fewer AoE attacks, and so Street Sweeper at Master Sergeant is quite appealing. Whereas if you do have exosuits and do have AoE attacks, all of a sudden Street Sweeper becomes considerably less appealing and Lethal becomes much more appealing. So I'm going to give you what is like my typical Legend difficulty assault build, and typically in Legend campaigns I do try to go for exosuits. I have very Alpha Strike centered squads. In large, huge late game missions, I'm fairly reliant on Sharpshooters for damage, and I do have assaults, and their job is to clean up enemies who come toward me and eventually sort of be unleashed to clean up the end of the fight maybe, but for the most part they're sort of hunkering and playing defensively until a target presents itself. And so that's how these soldiers fit into my strategy, and that's how I'm building them in these Gunnery and Master Sergeant perks. But that's not how you have to use assaults, and especially if you're playing on a different difficulty, there's no reason at all to think that exactly what I'm doing would make sense to do on a different difficulty, because you're playing a game with different numbers in it, and so you may have different weaknesses that you want to attack and things like that. You may want to build slightly differently. So anyway, I'm going to give you what I think about the perks and what I pick and why, and I'll be interested to hear what you guys think. At Gunnery Sergeant, Bring 'em On is the only perk that I'm going to talk about today that I don't think is completely insane. It's fine. It's not that bad a perk at all. It gives you +1 damage on crits for every 2 enemies you can see, up to a maximum of 8. And an assault's typically going to be right in the middle of everything. And so maybe you can see 4 enemies or something pretty regularly, so that you're getting +2 damage on crits. It's not that bad. You probably have 100% crit against most enemies that you're shooting at, so that's probably +2 damage on a good number of the shots that you take. Doesn't work for Overwatch shots, but if you're taking Bring 'em On, your assault's not really taking that many Overwatch shots, so whatever. Yeah. It's fine. It's an okay perk. It's the only perk here that's all I can really say about it. It gives you a little bit of extra damage once or twice a turn, maybe. Cool. I've never taken that at Gunnery Sergeant on an assault. We'll talk about Untouchable next, which I gave a 4 out of 10 for alpha striking because it sort of lets you move more flexibly and worry less about being wounded in return, and an 8 out of 10 for breakdowns. Untouchable lets you dodge an attack, no questions asked, if you score a kill in your turn. So in my turn, I run up to something, kill it, and there's 1 enemy left alive, but I just leave my assault uncovered against that enemy, and very reliably its AI tree decides to shoot at my assault, and my entire squad is saved. Hooray. So Untouchable's nice, but in real rough scrums, it doesn't do that much. It's best used in the sort of gimmicky way that I just described, where you're manipulating the AI tree of 1 enemy to convince it to shoot your assault and protect your other soldiers in that way. It doesn't work nearly as well in a situation where you're fighting, say, 8 to 10 enemies and one of them's shooting your assault. One of the biggest problems with it is you actually can make your assault quite well defended against 8 to 10 enemies. You just use Fortify, you put them in heavy cover, you maybe put an aid protocol or smoke grenade on them, and all of a sudden they're in pretty good shape. Maybe they're wearing a hazmat vest, so on and so forth. Untouchable doesn't really do anything if you just do that. All the enemies are taking 5 to 10% shots at you. Some of them are using poison attacks, which you're immune to. It just doesn't matter that you have Untouchable because the attacks are going to miss already. So Untouchable is a cool perk. I think it's strongest on sort of extremely light timed guerrilla operations. And if you're struggling with those a lot, then you could consider picking it up for those. But typically, I am building my soldiers for the larger battles in late game because, one, you don't have to beat extremely light guerrilla operations to win the campaign. You have to beat 4 different large battles. That's what lets you actually, get the win screen at campaign end. So there's that to consider. And then 2, I just find that the extremely light missions are quite easy to handle with soldiers of basically any sort. And there isn't much value to creating soldiers specifically for them when I could instead be leveling up my A and B team to be able to take on the larger late game missions. Close Combat Specialist is a second perk scoring a perfect 10 on this tree. I gave it an 8 out of 10 for alpha striking and a 10 out of 10 for breakdown play. What Close Combat Specialist does, and it's been nerfed significantly from release, you get a free reaction shot whenever an enemy enters a certain proximity of you. It's about 4 tiles around you. And the nerf to Close Combat Specialist that has happened is that those shots cost 2 ammo each. And so if you have an advanced extended mag or an elite extended mag on your shotgun, you'll be able to get 3, right? Shotguns start at 3 or 4. Late game, you should be able to prioritize the shotgun with an elite expanded magazine if that's what you need. You should be able to get 3 close combat specialist attacks off if you're in a situation where you really need them. And these attacks are very, very valuable. I've talked a lot in the previous episode, mid-game assaults, talking about close encounters. I spoke a lot about how many enemies like to run at you in this game. Flanking snakes and drones and stun lancers and zombies. Even enemies like regular advent troopers or mutons are often pretty excited to get up in your face or to take a very close flank to you or something like that. And so close combat specialists will just go off without you having to do anything. And it will go off like twice a turn if you're in a really big fight. And it will deal a ton of damage. Now, you can't crit on Overwatch as an assault, unfortunately, but you do have quite nice base damage on your shotgun. You likely have some form of ammo equipped to the soldier, which deals extra damage. And, well, we'll get to Master Sergeant, I suppose. So, I've had just extremely pleasant experiences with close combat assaults, with perhaps the most fond of mine being an HQ where I was sort of fighting 20 enemies or something. And often in HQs there are sort of choke points, funnels between buildings or between a troop carrier and a building or something like that. And I played a mission where I just put 2 assaults with close combat specialists sort of on either side of the choke point, and enemies just ran at me and took 20 damage over and over and over again. And the largest flaw of the shotgun's Overwatch is always that you struggle to control it in such a way that it's high % chance to hit. If you can get an Overwatch at close range by, say, overwatching against an enemy who's about to run around a corner or something like that, shotgun Overwatch is extremely good. On Rendezvous, you're often able to set up Overwatches in that way, where on a Rendezvous you have rebels and it's an untimed mission, and so there's one pod patrolling sort of left and right across the map, and you can just walk up to halfway down their patrol line or whatever, hide behind a wall, and then as they walk past you, all of your shotgun Overwatches go off and they blow up. Shotgun Overwatches are amazing if you can engineer that way for them to work, but it's very hard to do it usually. You'd have to typically spend a PCS slot on a fire control PCS in order to guarantee that your shotgun shot was going to go off like that. And that's a very expensive slot. You'd rather use probably a mobility PCS on an assault. They're quite dependent on mobility to really excel. Close Combat Specialist just makes those happen for you without you really having to try in any way. They happen multiple times a turn, and it's bonkers. This perk is my favorite perk in Long War 1 and Long War 2, quite possibly. I don't know. I really like Hit and Run in Long War 1. I really like Close Encounters in Long War 2 as well. Close Combat Specialist is absurd, though. Very, very strong. At Master Sergeant, we're looking at Street Sweeper, Chain Lightning, and Lethal. Chain Lightning is like the upside on Chain Lightning is extreme. It's an arc thrower shot at every enemy in view of you, which, if coupled with, say, a bunker buster, could all of a sudden be stunning 16 enemies. And you can even use Chain Lightning in a situation where you don't have all of their cover removed, and if you just sort of stun half of them, then you can kill the other ones with the rest of your soldiers, and the half of them that you did stun will be around next turn for you to kill them. So Chain Lightning's a very strong sort of effect. There are a couple of things that I don't like about Chain Lightning much at all. One is that this soldier is a very strong soldier, very strong damage dealer, and so we really don't want to be taking all of these arc thrower perks building up toward Chain Lightning. it wouldn't be that bad to take Chain Lightning at Master Sergeant right now on this build path and just play it without the other perks. It's that level of strong. It's a very good ability. But the second problem is that it's somewhat redundant with Sting Grenades on Grenadiers, and even with like flashbangs, almost like even if you don't have a Sting Grenade, you can often just flashbang enemies and just use Fortify on your assault. Here, we took Fortify at Sergeant. We can just stand in heavy cover and Fortify and have the enemies not do anything much. So it's a very flashy perk when it works, but I think that Chain Lightning is a perk which looks really good and isn't actually quite as good as it looks. I gave it 8 out of 10 for Alpha Striking and 6 out of 10 for Breakdowns. Both of those are very high ratings and reflect my opinion that what it does can be very strong. But in reality, we don't really want to build the Arc Thrower perks that support this very well, and we don't really need it to happen in most situations. Most of the time, to make this happen, we're going to want to move our assault forward and possibly destroy enemy cover, and we're going to want to take perks which weren't strong compared to their alternatives for the last 6 months of the campaign, and then we hit the button and we just stun the enemies. We're just mitigating. There are so many ways to mitigate enemies in this game. There are free perks, like Incoming as an officer perk, to mitigate enemies who are going to hit you with explosives, or you can use Rapid Deployment on a Grenadier and just chuck a dense smoke as a free action, or a Sting Grenade that will consume a consumable. But what missions are you playing where you need to do this more than once? They're just, even the late game huge missions, you don't need to really do this more than once, in my opinion. So, Chain Lightning is a very strong effect which doesn't have that great a place in this game, in my opinion. Street Sweeper at Master Sergeant, I mentioned a little bit earlier. If I don't have any cone attacks in my campaign, then Street Sweeper is pretty appealing. Street Sweeper is something that you can use to justify putting a stock on a shotgun, which is a lot of fun. So you can use it to break concealment and just put your assault near an enemy pod, steady the turn before, and then press Street Sweeper and they all die. And they do so pretty reliably. So I don't think Street Sweeper does that much other than that assaults don't already do. You can definitely use it to take flanks against enemies and hit them with a big cone attack and deal a lot of damage, and that's really nice. And I would be more inclined to consider this perk if I didn't have exosuits for assaults in my campaign, because exosuits can already do that and you don't have to spend a perk on it. I'm always hesitant to get very attached to a perk which makes your Overwatch ambush stronger, or your concealment breaking turn stronger, I guess I should have said. Because your concealment breaking turn can already be absurdly strong. All you have to do is Overwatch ambush against the pod and they'll die pretty much. You can just wait for them to stand by environmental hazards and then blow everything up and they all die, and you didn't need to take a Master Sergeant perk to do that. There are lots of ways to make your concealment breaking attack against a pod effective without needing to dedicate expensive perks to it. And so for that reason, I don't like Street Sweeper very much for opening up on pods. It's the same reason why I don't like Trench Gun for killing network towers. There are just so many people in my early game assault mentioned that they really liked Trench Gun for killing network towers, and it's like, the enemies are stunned for 2 turns on network towers. You don't have to take a corporal perk to kill. they can't move. You just you, you just have to shoot. Anyway, I think that this perk does something really cool, but that we can achieve that really cool thing in a different way without having to select it. And if we don't have to select it, we get to pick lethal instead. And lethal deals 2 additional points of base damage with your primary weapon. And that's both really boring and really, really good. It outshines Bring 'Em On by a long, long, long way, even though Bring 'Em On will often be doing something sort of comparable to lethal. Often Bring 'Em On will more or less let you deal 2 extra damage with your primary weapon. But lethal works on Overwatch turns, and we could take Close Combat Specialist at Gunnery Sergeant because we didn't bring 'Em On to the tree. And so lethal can apply 4 times a turn quite easily without you having to like command the soldier or anything. That's 8 extra damage per turn of combat. We're not using a cooldown to do that. We're not having to engineer ridiculous situations. All we have to do that is move our assault near some enemies, shoot one of them, and then reload our shotgun. And lethal deals 8 damage that turn. And then it deals 8 damage like every other turn. And there's a really important distinction to make between that 8 damage lethal is dealing and the like 200 damage or whatever that Street Sweeper can deal, because Street Sweeper can sometimes deal a lot of damage. But let's say like more realistically, Street Sweeper's in like a moderately okay situation and it only deals 60 damage or whatever. The thing is, we dealt 8 damage with lethal, right? But we also got to shoot 4 times. And when we shoot 4 times, we like deal another 50 damage. And so this perk is a passive which is applying to our assault, just doing regular assault things, and it's making our assault way, way better at doing those regular assault things. And regular assault things are already really good. And because of that, I value it very highly. I gave it 9 out of 10 for alpha and 9 out of 10 for breakdowns. Compare it to center mass on trees where soldiers get to shoot multiple times, which I typically have been given 7 out of 10, 7 out of 10. And I think the comparison makes a lot of sense. This is just center mass basically, but you're getting an extra point of damage out of it, and it's on a soldier who can very easily leverage 3-4 shots a turn. So that's what I think about assaults. I think that these are all around, I think that assaults are the strongest class in the game. They do not do some really focused and game-breaking things that other classes can do. Like they don't throw sting grenades, and they don't have squad sight, for example. And they don't have huge AoE consumables. But if you can bring those things to a squad with other soldiers, I think that assaults are sort of what you'd want to build those other things around. My ideal squad is going to have 2 assaults in it, and they are my front line, and they deal with 80% of the problems in the game probably. And then I have a sniper and a sting grenade grenadier, and maybe a technical with a bunker buster or something like that, and a flamethrower. And those guys can get us the rest of the way to 100%. But your assaults are such a strong core building block. How much I love assaults is largely responsible for how little I value rangers, because I think that a lot of people look to rangers for that core building block, and I just think rangers do way less. It's almost embarrassing how much less rangers do than assaults if you look at situations that you're regularly in. And I've tried to play with rangers as the core of my squads, and I've also tried to play with assaults as the core of my squads, and I can confidently say that assaults have performed much, much, much better for me. So Hope you guys have enjoyed hearing my opinions about assaults. I'd love to hear your comments and feedback and your own opinions and how you've done with them. If you want to see more of this series, of course, are we at the halfway point? Are we? Wow. Well, there are lots of videos already published, and then there will be another out tomorrow. I'm going to have to decide which class is next. If you want to hear some more stuff from me about the strategic layer or more like actual campaign play sort of stuff, you should check out Filthy Robot's YouTube, which I'm going to link below the video, where I'm playing a collaborative campaign with him where he's at the controls and I'm sort of over his shoulder on Skype. You know, we're just talking about decisions. He's a very good strategy gamer, but isn't as knowledgeable about all the inner workings of the code in Long War II as I am, and so he knows like exactly what the right questions to ask are, and then I'm pretty good at explaining exactly what the answers are. And I think that it's a really valuable series if you want to step up your Long War II game and start to really understand how all the mechanics work and how to make the tough decisions. For now, though, I'm out. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you tomorrow for another class review.